Good evening, everyone. My name is Wayne Morel. I'm the Director of Planning for the City of Panama Springs. Just to let you know, in terms of how the meeting will be conducted, it will be recorded. So if you want a copy of the recording later on, you can request it. If you have any comments, it will be limited to 3 minutes. So you're probably all here because you received a notice because you're impacted by the whole general plan land use changes. So tonight we do have a presentation from a consultant. So probably everything that I said before will not be in the recording because I wasn't speaking on the mic. But just to let you know, you will have an opportunity to provide comments. You will be limited to 3 minutes. And again, the meeting is being recorded. We do have a presentation tonight by our consultant, MIG, and we have Mr. Jose Rodriguez that will do the presentation. He will give you an overview of the process, some of the new uses that were developed as a result of the general plan. The city did adopt a general plan in February of this year. It was the first such general plan adoption in more than 30-something years. So a lot of this is what you will hear today is a direct result of what happened during the adoption of that general plan. Thank you.
Well, great. Thanks, Wayne. All right, so Wayne introduced himself. I just want to briefly introduce myself. As Wayne mentioned, my name is Jose Rodriguez, and I'm a project manager with MIG. And I'll go through the presentation. There are other members joining us on Zoom. That's Laura Stetson, who's principal with MIG. And then we also have Quan Nguyen, who's joining us as well, sitting at the entrance. All right, since there's only a few of us here, and I know there's a few on Zoom, we'll make this a little bit informal. If anyone has any questions, let me know. But we'll provide an opportunity for you to provide comments at the end of the presentation. I'm just going to go ahead and provide an overview of the project and the process thus far leading up to date. And then I'm going to talk about the key zoning changes. We're going to talk about mixed use, the industrial changes, and then we're going to talk a little bit about non-conforming situations, and I'll explain what that is during the presentation. Then talk about next steps, and we'll leave the ending for questions and comments. All right, so let's go straight into it. The overview. As Wayne mentioned, there was a general plan process that was conducted over the last 2.5 years. We're now at the implementation phase where we're updating the zoning in response to the general plan. Specifically and this is not a comprehensive zoning update. We're only doing focused changes to the zoning text and to the zoning map. So we're looking at addressing and providing new mixed use zones, a new high density residential zone, new downtown zone, and the mixed use zones also apply to certain transit areas, existing and planned transit areas. And then we're going to talk about the heavy manufacturing and light manufacturing changes. There were some other changes to industrial, changing industrial to commercial, particularly along Washington. Not addressed in the zoning, but there was a freeway commercial land use change in the general plan. And then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the non-conforming situations and what does that mean. All right, to back up, the city adopted their general plan earlier this year. I think it was back in February. And the general plan provides the long-range vision for the city, for land use, for housing, for different elements. And these are all required by state law. This includes transportation, open space, noise, safety. There's a lot of elements. And the plan was adopted like I mentioned, earlier this year. A key component of the plan is the land use plan. And this sets the vision, what the land use is planned to be over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And there were some key changes that we made to the plan. Identified in red or in the red square boxes are new land use designations that were applied to the new land use plan. What we're now moving forward with, and we want to hear comments from the public, is the draft zoning map as well as text to the zoning. And so by state law, the zoning map has to be consistent with the land use plan that I shown previously. And we're working with staff to update the map and the text for the different zones. The first zones I want to talk about is mixed use. So why did we add mixed use to the city of Santa Fe Springs? One, actually, I'll go backwards. I said there's consistency with the general plan, and that's true. We're updating the zoning so that it's consistent with the land use plan that we identified. But there's been a lot of new state laws for housing. The state and regional governments have identified that Santa Fe Springs needs to be able to accommodate at least just under 1,000 new housing units over the next 8 years. This is a state requirement. And as you know, Santa Fe Springs is primarily built out. It's primarily an industrial city. So we had to look really hard to find where can we put those housing opportunities, where can we accommodate those number of units. The city doesn't have to build those. The private market will build it, but the land use and zoning has to be in place to allow for those 952 housing units. And if some of you live or have friends in other cities, all the cities within Southern California are updating their housing element. Every single city currently is either have gotten their certification or working towards certification. What we ended up doing is identifying 3 areas for mixed use. One in the northern part of the city along Washington. There is proposal for a new light rail station that's going at Washington and Norwalk, and that's moving forward. Metro is releasing an environmental impact report shortly. And that station, although not still planned to be built in the near future, they are looking to have a light rail station at that location. So we looked at mixed use opportunities in the commercial areas along that area. And I'll show you some detailed maps of these areas shortly. The city was also interested in a downtown area. There's been a desire for more communal gathering spaces, places where residents and the business community can come together for whether for lunches and more restaurants, but also looking for other opportunities for residential uses. So within the downtown area, which is just east of this location, we've identified a downtown core around Heritage Park and a little bit of mixed use along Telegraph Road. And then the last area that we looked at is where the existing Metrolink station is at. We looked at mixed use across the street. Across the street from there, there's apartments there already. There's a walking distance to the Metrolink Norwalk Santa Fe Springs Metrolink station. And so that's another location where we looked at housing and mixed use. Mixed use, again allowing both commercial and housing opportunities at a little bit of a higher density or higher number of floors and stories. So this is a close-up of Washington Boulevard, the mixed use. The different colors indicate different densities of the residential. The more darker color allows for a higher density. The lighter pink allows for a lower density. So the mixed use TOD, that darker purple, allows up to 5 to 6 stories of mixed use, whereas the lighter mixed use, where it says 40, anywhere from 3 to 4 stories for mixed use, while allowing for commercial uses as well. This is the downtown area, again, around Heritage Park and along Telegraph and the different mixed use designations and densities. And then the last area that we looked at is on Imperial and Bloomfield. And again, this is directly across the street or near the Metrolink station. And we looked at a few properties just east of or west of the railroad tracks on Imperial Highway. For the new mixed use zoning designations, we'll have a series of different uses that are allowed, whether it's residential, commercial, offices. In the downtown area around Heritage Park, there are some existing industrial, light industrial and office uses. Those will still be allowed. Some of them will be allowed through what's called a conditional use permit, meaning they just have to go through a different discretionary process in front of the Planning Commission to get permits. But mixed use, multifamily, there'll be a very large table that lists the variety of uses that are permitted, that require a discretionary permit or permit with the planning commission, or what's not allowed. There will also be specific density standards that identify, the different setbacks, the heights, all those for the different mixed use designations will have specific development standards. Okay, now let's move to the industrial zoning changes. So why did we make the changes? Well, first, let me back up a little bit. The general plan that we updated for the city, this was one of the first updates in the last 25 years, except for the housing element. The housing element has to be updated, was typically a 4-year process. Now it's every 8 years. But a new element that was required was the environmental justice element. And because Santa Fe Springs has a large proportion of their housing designated as what's called disadvantaged communities, meaning they have close proximity to pollution burdens, but there's also some socioeconomic challenges within some of those neighborhoods. And so by state law, the city was required to prepare an environmental justice element and recognize what are some of the challenges and the pollution burdens that some of the residents confront, that those living in the city. The other obvious changes was, again, for consistency with the general plan. All right, so the changes that we looked at, again, are specific on this map. The map to the left identifies the heavy manufacturing areas in the zoning code, or within the land use. It's called heavy industrial. Those primarily are located within so many feet of residential areas, both proposed and existing residential areas. The map to the right is the changes that we've made to light industrial. And now there are some properties down by Florence where we converted it to a business park designation, or there is an existing mobile home park where we designate it as residential. And then there are some commercial areas that we've also changed that for the fact that some of those existing properties were already commercial and not an industrial use. All right, I know this is really small text and I'm not anticipating you to read this, but this is the list of the uses that are permitted under the heavy manufacturing zone. So the properties that currently have heavy manufacturing, the plan is to change it to the light manufacturing zone. And the list of light manufacturing is similar. There's obviously less heavier manufacturing uses allowed. Some of these uses are allowed in the light manufacturing zone with a conditional use permit. But there are some consistencies, or at least some similar uses that are allowed both in heavy and light manufacturing. And if anyone has any questions, we'll try to answer them later. If your particular use is affected, that was originally in the heavy manufacturing use, but now in the light manufacturing use, staff will do our best to kind of answer those questions to see if your use is still allowed under light industrial, or they can do a little bit of research to confirm. Let me just show a few maps that identify the specific areas where we've made the light industrial, or I should say light manufacturing under the zoning changes to. So you can see up by the Los Nietos area, just south of, or just north of the city boundary, those were changed to light industrial. And again, properties that bordered along existing single families, residential uses, or near schools. And then again, on Telegraph, there were some properties that were changed for the future mixed use designations as well. In the middle part of the city, properties along Florence, properties along Shoemaker Avenue, and again, those that are in close proximity to residential uses, those were changed to light manufacturing. And you can see also some of the commercial and residential uses that we changed in some of those areas, particularly along Lakeland and Norwalk. There's an existing mobile home park that was designated as an industrial zone, and we changed that to residential. And then to find other areas to meet the housing requirements, we did change some industrial properties adjacent to senior housing. We changed those to residential uses as well. And again, the southern part along Imperial, where there's some existing commercial, originally designated as industrial, we changed those to residential, and then some industrial properties along Rosecrans. Okay, let me talk about non-conforming situations. And this was in a result of the general plan land use changes that we've made. We did hear from a large proportion of property owners that were concerned about the land use changes we were making. So to help alleviate some of their issues, we agreed to make some changes to the non-conforming sections and to make them a little bit flexible for property owners. So just real brief for those who don't know, non-conforming basically means when the city changes the laws, they change the zoning, but your property or your use was legally established previously, and then we change the laws, it becomes non-conforming. And the non-conforming can apply to a lot, it can apply to a use, and it can apply to development standards. So if we change the development standards, that the building setbacks, the height of the building and whatnot can also become non-conforming. The use, if you have a particular use, and we change the land use or the zoning, then the use can become non-conforming, as well as a lot size. A lot of the zoning, in many cases, required minimum lot sizes. And if you change the zoning requirements, the lot sizes can become non-conforming. So why did we make the changes to the non-conforming section? One, we wanted to implement the general plan policies, but we also wanted to facilitate a lot of the existing businesses and uses and improvements that have been made and recognize that those have been applied. You know, the property owners have made investments to their properties. We want to recognize those. So basically what the non-conforming changes do is provide more flexibility for property owners. If you're non-conforming, you're allowed to remain. We also wanted those non-conforming sections were updated a long time ago. And so part of the process was to make it a little bit easier to understand, remove some redundancies, clean up the language, and again, provide a little bit of flexibility for property owners and uses. So this is what, based on, I think, numerous meetings with industrial property owners, various property owners, different businesses, the Planning Commission, City Council, what we put in policy into the general plan is that any building, land use, lot that becomes non-conforming as a part of the land use changes we made can continue to operate. They can continue to operate as long as they want, until the site is redeveloped. And then at that time, the property owner can decide based on the zoning requirements how they want to redevelop their property. Now, there is some caveats. One is if the property owner wanted to expand their non-conforming building or use, that will require a conditional use permit, meaning it would have to come to the city, get the permit, and come before the Planning Commission to get it reviewed, and they'll make the determination on whether that's allowed or not. The other change that we made was, what was agreed upon in terms of the policy, was making sure that the buildings could always be maintained for safety reasons, for repairs. Those don't need any conditional use permits, and even if they're non-conforming, those would be allowed to continue. Yeah, and I'm going to repeat your question because no one on Zoom can answer. But yeah, go ahead if you want to. So the question is, if the property is designated non-conforming as a result of the zoning changes, do you have to go and request a conditional use permit? No. The conditional use permit is only if you want to expand, if you wanted to double the size of your building, if you wanted to do a different use that is more intensive, will require that use, will require that permit. But if the zoning does take place and changes and your property becomes non-conforming, your property can still continue to operate. The city cannot stop you. So you'll be technically still a non-conforming use, but there are no, what a part of the zoning changes and the non-conforming is we removed what's called the amortization of properties, meaning the city will have to force you to stop your use within a certain period of time. That's been removed. And so you can continue to operate as long as as long as your use and your property are safe to do so.
Jose, this is Laura. I'm sorry, moderating meeting. If we could hold questions to the end, that would be great.
Okay, so we're gonna. How about you hold on to your questions? I actually only have a few more slides, and I'm gonna turn it over to the public. So we're almost done. I have the wrong title here, but oh no, I actually don't. If you want to look at the draft non-conforming text, we have that available. It's on this website here. I know it's kind of a long name there, but it's the Reimagine Santa Fe Springs website. It was originally for the general plan. We're changing it for the zoning. If you go to the ZAG page, which is the zoning advisory group, we've presented draft non-conforming text. And then shortly next week, we will be presenting the draft mixed use language as well. The zoning for the zoning text for industrial will not be changed at this time. So the zoning will remain. The only change for the industrial properties, excuse me, is the map changes from heavy manufacturing to light manufacturing. So next steps real quick. We've been meeting since June for various meetings with the community, with the zoning advisory committee. We had a planning commission study session last month. And staff wanted to make sure that they notified property owners of the zoning changes. We are planning, we would like to meet with the business group, the same group that we've met previously during the general plan, to present the draft non-conforming text, and that date is still planned. And then next week, as I mentioned, there's a zoning advisory group. We meet at Wednesdays at 5 o'clock. The Zoom is available on the website, the Reimagine Santa Fe Springs website. The public is invited to attend, and we will hold your questions and comments towards the end of the meeting. Now, there are some requirements to have the mixed use completed in October, or at least the zoning changes for some state law requirements. But the city wants to make sure we hear different property owners and any of the draft text. We want to make sure that it's formally reviewed by the public and property owners. So planning commission meetings were anticipated for next month, but they may be, those are still to be determined. And then lastly, go back to the Reimagine Santa Fe Springs website. There's a comment feature on there where you can provide comments. They'll go directly to staff. We will be posting events and upcoming meetings, and we did put in a zoning advisory group page where we'll put the presentations of the meetings, the summaries of the meetings, and if there's draft text, you can pull the draft text from there. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions. And ma'am, why don't I lead you first if you wanted to go and ask that second question?
Hold on.
Oh, and then Wayne's going to give you a mic to. Then I don't have to repeat your question.
Now, Jose, I think what we'll do is, sorry for the disembodied voice here.
Yep, go ahead.
Let's first do people who are in the room with questions, and then we'll turn it to folks who are on Zoom and ask them to raise their hands if they have a question, and we will unmute them. And if everybody could keep their question or comment to 3 minutes, that would be great. And if you have more to say, we can have you do part 2 at the end, but we want to make sure that we can get through everybody first who has a question.
And then both myself, Laura, and staff will be available to, if there's a specific question, to try to answer your questions, but we're also taking comments as well. So if you have specific comments, we'll be taking them as well. So go ahead.
So it's a simple question for, again, the non-conforming use, for the non-conforming use. Is it the company that's grandfathered or the type of business that's grandfathered? Does that make sense?
Right.
For example, if somebody passes, like the company changes names or changes to a new owner, or stops doing half of what it was doing.
Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but it stays with the use. Is that correct? So it stays with the use. So if the property owner decides to change owners, but the use still remains the same, you know, what the use is within that building, then it stays with the use. So it doesn't change with the property owner.
Okay.
Or a change in property owners.
And is there a plan for how the time horizon for the zoning, the new zoning? Is it like a 10-year horizon or a 20 years? Does it last as long as the general plan?
There is no ending date for the zoning changes. Once the zoning's adopted, those are the zoning changes that'll be there for in perpetuity. until the city council and the city makes changes in the future, which can be a long time from now, or if they decide to change to this, it only can be changed when the city council and the planning commission make changes to it based on staff's recommendations.
Okay, and the land use plan, same thing?
The same thing. The land use plan, again, is meant to be more visionary and long-term, and so it's very general. But they typically can, the last one wasn't updated. The last one, previous to one we adopted, was updated about 20 plus years ago. So it could be another long time before it gets updated again.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Oh, there we go.
Rudy, Revco Spring. I want to ask, how do you know the difference between light and heavy manufacturing? How do you define the difference?
The zoning code, well, a couple things. One, the land use calls it light industrial and heavy industrial or industrial. And there's a generalized description of what that is on the land use plan, but the zoning is specific. It'll have a specific definition of what light manufacturing, what heavy manufacturing is. And in the zoning code, it will list all of the different uses that are allowed, that are permitted for each of the zones. What's permitted, what's an accessory use if it's a little commercial store, or what's a conditional use. They'll list all of those. And the conditional uses are the ones that typically are a little bit more intensive, or can provide more pollution burdens or more impacts. So they'll have to go in front of the planning commission for approval through a conditional use permit. And it's not guaranteed. They make the determination on whether that gets approved or not. So the zoning code specifically has how it's defined and the uses in them.
Light manufacturing, as far as I'm concerned, I think that's what we've been considered for light manufacturing from the beginning. So I'm just wondering about whether it would affect us in that respect.
And I recommend, if you have a specific use, talk with staff to confirm what that use is and how it's consistent with the light manufacturing, or if it falls within the uses permitted under the light manufacturing or heavy manufacturing. Anyone in the room here before we turn it over to the Zoom participants? Anyone else have a question or comment? And again, we're not making decisions today. The goal for today is to get public input. So if you have a comment, you have a question, and this won't be your only time, you could come back and talk with staff. You can go to the website, and then there will be the zoning advisory group meeting. You can provide comments there at the end. And then during the public hearing process, when it goes before the planning commission and it has to go in front of the city council, you'll be able to provide comments at those meetings as well.
Correct. And even as if there aren't any more questions here and we go towards, I see the gentleman raise his hand, but we go towards the individual that's on Zoom. If you think of something after we've finished with them, then by all means, you can go ahead. Just speak into the mic.
Surely. Does that website, Reimagine Santa Fe Springs, list the type of zonings, or what can we find out on the website?
You know what? Tomorrow I'll go ahead and put a link to the city's municipal code. The municipal code identifies has all the zoning, but it also has all the other codes for traffic, for everything that it's basically the city's laws. There is a chapter 155 or title 155, forgive me guys, that's specifically the zoning. And in that location, you'll scroll down, you'll find the light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing. But I'll put a link on the Reimagine website. But if you go to the city's website and look for municipal code, it will come up. It is a third-party program that specifically is designed to codify the laws, but they're the city's laws. Yep.
Anyone else before we go to the individuals that's on Zoom? Okay.
So on Zoom, I see there's 2 hands raised. We'll call on the first one, Joseph Flores.
Hello, how you doing? I have one comment. As a resident of Santa Fe Springs, I like the restructuring to address housing and economic development to bring tax dollars to our city. And in this capacity, I'm representing Rio Hondo College. And I was just wondering, are there any impacts? We have our fire academy at 11400 Greenstone, and I'm looking at a planning map, and I don't know if it's considered public space or if it's industrial. Is there any impact to our fire academy on Greenstone, south of Fire Station 1?
Well, staff, I'll take an attempt to answer that question. To let you know, as part of the general plan update, so the general plan document, there was an environmental impact report that was prepared, and it does identify what are the impacts to the environment. There are no, I'll defer to staff, but I know there
Actually,
are
I think
no.
Jose, he's probably asking whether or not they have a land use change that affects their ability to use that property. I think, Mr. Flores, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's correct, because we have training and we burn things, and occasionally we get complaints from residents saying it's a little too smoky, but it is a fire academy that, yeah, that's what I was asking, the land use.
I don't know if you recall what the property
Right.
is.
So the Rio Hondo Fire Academy is just south of the fire headquarters. They currently have a CUP, I believe, for the academy. That property is on the east side, will be rezoned from M2 to M1.
I will recommend, if you want to give your contact information to staff, but based off the light industrial designation, I don't see it having an impact, particularly if there is a conditional use on the property. But staff, I think they're pulling some of the documents now to give you some answers. But I would also, if you can on Zoom, provide your contact information. I know Quan and Wayne will happily get back to you.
Okay, I know them both, so I'll just email them and maybe set up a meeting to get a little more information.
Great, thank you.
So the next hand that I see up is Kevin Romano.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a property manager in Santa Fe Springs, and we have a couple of buildings that are going to be changed from M2 to M1, and some would be considered non-conforming uses. And so my question is, if our tenants move out at that point, the next tenant, if they're going to be doing a use that's not within the light industrial or M1 zone, would need a conditional use permit. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. If the use changes, or if it's different, it would have to meet the light manufacturing uses.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
And keep in mind that the listing of uses is in the zoning code, and it is quite expansive in terms of light industrial uses.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wong, I'm not seeing any more hands right now.
Yes, I don't either. If there's anybody in the audience or on Zoom that would like to speak, please raise your hand at this point.
Oh, he's not raising his hand virtually, but I see his camera. Dan Haskins. Dan Haskins, do you hear? Your microphone, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose, for the presentation so far. As a member of the ZAG committee, I appreciate that opportunity. I have one question this evening. You had indicated on the general plan, because the properties that I am involved with are being designated and changed to mixed use, TOD 60 units to the acre, high density. Now that that's going to be changed to potential residential uses, will that now fall under the category of the 4 to 8 year mandatory general plan update review process where currently under the commercial use it is not?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, no, you're not, you wouldn't, the 8-year requirement, it doesn't apply to property owners. What the city has to do is identify sites that are available within the next 8 years that could be built for affordable or the lower, designated as lower income sites. Just to let you know, your site will not be designated as a lower income site. So it's not anticipated to be, based on the information you're provided on the existing leases on the property. We're removing that as a housing element site for a couple of reasons. One, based on the lease information you provided, but HCD won't accept, they questioned that site. And so staff has decided on the next element to update that site will be removed. So that won't apply to your property. And as a mixed use site, it does allow for commercial. So you will not be a non-conforming use, but maybe some of the development standards could be non-conforming. Nonetheless, it's since you're an established legal use, it doesn't really apply to your property or use.
Thank you very much. That answers my question.
At this time, is there any other individuals either in the audience or on Zoom that would like to speak?
And then, so just to conclude, if anyone again has any questions or comments, I recommend contacting staff. Kwong has put up his both his email and his phone number. You can give him a call. You can go on the website and submit comments. But staff is really happy to talk with you, to talk about your property, to talk about your use, and what the potential changes could mean. So with that, if there's no more questions or comment, Wayne, did you want to say anything else before we wrap up? Oh, one more question. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. A couple things. One, we will meet with the zoning advisory group. It is open to the public, but we're limiting to the discussion to only the advisory group. And if there's time at the end, we could open it up to public questions, but it'll only be at the end. Then there will be no more public meetings. It will go through the public hearing process, which is open to the public. Staff has to publicly notice staff reports, and that process will be coming in the next couple of months. All right, with that, then we'll go ahead and close this meeting. And I appreciate everyone, both on Zoom and those who came in to public today, for coming in today. Thank you.